Hey, I'm Joseph Coyne, physical performance coach, track and field coach, PhD candidate at the moment. You're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome back, or welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by the Gold Coast Marathon and Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you a range of episodes, including featured performers, coaches' corners, expert editions, and interest editions. And on today's episode 164, I share with you a conversation that I recently had with exercise physiologist, sports scientist, and performance coach Joseph Coyne. By way of bio, Joseph has been the physical preparation coach for the Chinese Athletics Association jump and sprinting athletes. He then went on to be the performance manager for the Chinese Olympic Committee's National Sports Training Center in the lead up to the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. Joseph is currently completing a PhD at the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas. And for his work, Joseph has been sought out by individual athletes, including some of Australia's preeminent rugby league players and also surfers. And Joseph is also the host of the ASCA Podcast, the Australian Strength and Conditioning Podcast, which is a must listen for any health professional or individual looking to get the most out of their strength and conditioning training. And on today's episode, we explore strength and conditioning, including concepts of high and low neural drive, the importance of subjective feedback in tracking and progressing training, why Joseph believes it's important to change our mindset from a weight-based model to a power-based model, how to incorporate speed work into your strength and conditioning program, the top mistakes that recreational athletes make in the gym, and Joseph also shares around his grandmother's filter test. There's some great tips on how to strengthen your hamstrings and so much more in this expert edition. So let's jump in with Joseph Coyne, PhD scholar, strength and conditioning coach on this expert edition. Joseph Coyne, this is a real treat. It's been something we've been working on for some time, but before we get too far into this expert edition with your expertise around all things strength conditioning, performance coaching, exercise physiology, firstly, congratulations on the latest addition to your family. Beautiful young Haley, you're, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your son's name right, but a little brother to Harlan.
That's it. Thank you, sir. Yeah, just Hale. Yeah.
And just a matter of a few days young, I believe, or maybe 1 week.
Yeah, just over a week. Last Wednesday. Crazy.
And so the question we always ask guests is, what's one thing you're learning at the moment? And I presume that might be relating to family life.
How to operate on little to no sleep.
And, well, you look as fresh as daisies, so obviously you're doing something right. But well done. And I mean, growing up with a father like yourself, as parents, of course, you don't want your children to feel any expectation or pressure, but I imagine there would be some fairly decent athletic genes flowing through the bloodline.
Nah, mate, look, probably more show than go on my behalf, but the wife was pretty good. So who knows? As long as they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, Joseph, you've done a lot in recent times. Obviously the work that's well chronicled on your Instagram gallery and other places with, the Chinese athletics team. You recently were in Vegas for visiting, I believe, the Performance Institute for the UFC. Anything interesting you picked up from your journey there? Yeah,
the UFC PI is really cool. I encourage if you're involved in sport or or if you're even not even interested in the UFC, to get on there and research it. And if you do work for a team, that they're pretty accommodating to people coming in there wanting to tour the facility and have a look around. But yeah, it's a really nice facility. Got some great people running it, and it's a world-class facility. But I guess the best thing is it's staffed with world-class people, and you can have all the humdingers and tools and that sort of thing, but if you don't have the people, it's pointless in my opinion. So you got to get the people first, and then add the tools on top of that.
When you say the people, you mean their skill set, their expertise?
Yeah, 100%, and their ability to coach, their how they deal with people. You can have a great skill set and great expertise, but if you can't get that across, can't communicate it well, can't teach that, it's an issue. You might not get very far, and it's one of the reasons that great say athletics coaches, S&C coaches, a lot of them come from PE teaching backgrounds where they've had to learn how to control adolescent boys, 30 to 40 of them, you know what I mean? And so you pick up things on how you get your point across, how to teach things, what works for you, your style. And so there's no coincidence that a lot of really, really good coaches come from that background. And
what's one thing you're going to implement differently after observing the UFC Institute there in your own work?
So I actually did some research when I was out there. Part of my PhD was that they had a shared interest. The UFC had a shared interest in my PhD, and my PhD is on subjective training load and performance. And what I did out there, without saying too much of it because the paper will be released sometime soon, but we looked at omega wave, which is a measure of heart rate variability and direct current that I've used previously over in China, and the UFC also uses it. And then we looked at the previous day training impulse, e.g. how hard was the previous day's training, how long did it go for, and then what the omega wave was doing the following day, and then looking at the reliability of the omega wave, looking at the difference between measuring it first thing in the morning or when you arrive at the training hall, and looking at a thing called a signal to noise ratio for the omega wave, and also matching that up with some subjective, a subjective wellness scale called the acute recovery and stress scale, which is actually the only validated subjective wellness scale that I'm aware of from a guy called Michael Kalman. Just looking at those things, and you got to apply both if you want to get a full picture of. There's got to be objective and subjective. And when I first started my sort of research journey, I did a master's I started 2011. I was a big objective guy. I was like, it's got to be objective. The subjective stuff's a load of crap. People just say what they want, and it doesn't really mean anything. But I've gone full circle, easily gone full circle, where I'll definitely prioritise any subjective feedback you get over objective, and use the objective to fill in any pieces, but base most of my judgments on that subjective feedback. E.g., when you're talking to a guy, or ask them, how do you feel out of 10, you know what I mean, and they say 6, and you're getting a heart rate variability reading that might say they're an 8 out of 10, I'd probably go with the subjective stuff.
Yeah, wow. So, and you'd go with that because you feel it's a more accurate, it's their perception of effort, which I guess in many ways is, it can't be denied. It's their reality, isn't it, at that time, irrespective of the data?
Our perceptions are reality, 100%. And the subjective stuff is in the sort of research is probably a bit more sensitive to training, and a bit more likely to pick up changes based on what's actually happened in the training compared to any objective internal load marker.
So the research will be due out at some point, and we'll keep an eye out for that, Joseph, but well done.
Hopefully by 2030.
Well, another child now in the household, so we'll allow for that delay. But no, Joseph, you work with the Chinese as physical preparation coach for the Athletics Association, working with the jumping and sprinting athletes, working with some of the best speed and power athletes really on the planet. Can you put us in perspective with what a typical day or week would look like there working with those athletes?
Yeah, so it depended on the time of year, you know what I mean, the time of the season, whether an indoor season, outdoor season, because I had to work across, say, a high jump athlete, the long jump team. I did most of my work with the long jump team and the sprinters, but then I'd also fill in, say, with a high jump guy. Jungle Wei was his name, who's really interesting. If you want to check him out, he's quite a colourful character. They call him a yellow card in Chinese, and it's because pretty flamboyant. He's a bit of a celebrity in China, and he does some pretty funny stuff. So if you want to check him out, he's on Instagram, so he's a good follow for anybody out there. But yeah, typical day, you'll have, normally most coaches have a high-low training setup where it's high neural demand one day, low neural demand the next day. Sometimes it's back-to-back. I've worked in 3-day microcycles, 5-day microcycles, 7-day microcycles, which is your typical week, which I actually prefer the most because people have to live their lives outside of it. 10-day microcycles, and it's all setting up things around, hey, where do we best fit in our speed work, our acceleration work, where do we best fit in our max velocity work, where do we best fit in our strength work in the gym, our power work in the gym, or our mixed power on the track and gym, where do we do our speed endurance, where do we do our like tempo recovery, or all those types of things. How do we marry that all together so that we're not putting things that might be uncomplementary to one another in the same time frame that might hamper progress or might not give us optimal progress.
So it's all about that organising the training, and you use the term neural load for the uninitiated listening in. In terms of that, are you just talking about the body's response to the workout or the exercise?
So something that's high neural load would be where you have to sprint or you have to lift something maximally. Say, for instance, if you're running a marathon, even though there's high physiological load, the neural load, the central nervous system load, will probably be quite low because you're not at a very high percentage of your maximum. Obviously, in certain parts of the race, depending on who you are, maybe you are. But on the whole, a long, slow run would be a low neural load activity. And the faster you go, the closer you get to maximum, the more neural load, the more demand on the central nervous system there is.
Yeah, so organising all that to try and get the best adaptation from the athlete, minimising injury risk, I guess really is the art and the science that keeps everyone engaged.
No, 100%. And it depends on the sport. Like obviously sprinting and jumping at an elite level, it's all CNS derived, like it's central nervous system derived. It's not endurance based, or there's elements of endurance that people don't realise. For instance, if you're a long jumper, you've got to do six jumps sometimes, and you have to have good recovery capabilities between those jumps to keep progressing and hopefully keep getting further and further. But if you're say a marathon runner or a middle distance and up runner, your training might be less neural focused and a bit more physiological focused. Just it depends on the sport there.
Yeah, and I mean, you're working with the jumpers and the sprinters. There's overlaps, but they're so different. And then within that, how do you account, in your role, say working with the Chinese athletes, for them their individual differences? Some will respond to it, some won't. What percentage for you is the art versus the science? It's a hard question.
Yeah, so I'd say, just as a throwaway line, probably about 80% of the programs that were written and by myself were changed on the day, depending on things going on. So there's so much intuition about what's happening with a person and getting feedback from a person. I believe as you get more and more advanced, where literally I would write something down and 8 out of 10 things, or 8 out of 10, be it the volume, the amount of reps, the exercise, who knows, would be changed based on how they're looking when they're sprinting, how they're looking in their warm-up. Because normally you'd go, say, maybe they do a warm-up. Track and field might be about an hour for a jumping sprint warm-up. Where you go through mobility, blah, blah, blah. You do some sprint drills, you build the body temperature, and you get ready to run really fast. Then you might be doing, say, 40 minutes to an hour of technical work, and then you might go and do 40 minutes to an hour of actual, say, strength work in a gym. So most sessions, and it might be a bit different, but this is just a typical session. But if I'm sitting there watching all those things, and I'd assist as like an assistant technical coach with a lot of it, looking at how they're moving, are they looking sharp today? Are they looking flat today? How much talk? If they talk in shooting the shit, no, part of my French stuff, but they come in like drawing with the boys and like they're really up. they're either not training hard enough or it's a really good day. If they walk in like zombies, you're like, whoa, we might have to take a bit of volume off today, like not talking at all. And there's like a balance. Like if they walk in just talking a little bit but not too much, you're like, okay, well, and you're in the middle of like a preparation period. Yeah, this is going about right. I want them to be a bit tired but not too much. And I call that a talk test. And that's all those things, looking at how they move, all that sort of how do they what's the interactions like with other people? Are they upbeat? And all those things will change what happens in the weights and what happens in like how much volume, what happens with their sprinting, their jumping and so on. Yeah.
So interesting, because that really marries in with the comment you made just moments ago around, the importance of the subjective data. These are subjective assessments, your observation, these intangibles around how the athlete's engaging with their environment in many ways, which is great. But then flipping the coin, bad pun I know, but we'll take it because we're both fathers, Joseph. Flipping the coin, you're a great lover, and it's necessary for you to use data. I mean, Kaiser machines. For those that are uninitiated, what data can you get when it comes to working with your athletes around, the rate of force development, the speed of the movement? So for the average, recreational athlete, we go to the gym, we push and pull things around, and that's it. And all we know is, what weight's on the bar or on the machine. So what else exists out there in terms of other data points?
One big thing I always try and teach people is you want to change your mindset from thinking in a kg or weight-based model to start thinking a power-based model or wattage-based model. When you start understanding that almost all sport, whatever, like any centimetre, kg, second sport, or your closed skill sports, they're all power-based. It's work divided by time. E.g., in a 100-metre sprint, it's 100 metres. How fast you do that? You do it in 10 seconds versus you do it in 12 seconds. You're going to have less power doing it, produce less power in 12 seconds than you will in 10 seconds. So when you're lifting weights or when you're doing any other type of preparatory work, anything, it's got to be based around power. E.g., how much work can you do in how little time? Can you run a 10K in 40 minutes? Can you run a 10K in 38 minutes? You're producing more power if you run it in 38 minutes. So in the gym or jumping, e.g., if you jump further with the same amount of effort, you're producing more power. So changing your thinking about that, especially with lifting weights, because when you lift weights, the speed at which you lift it is actually quite important. It's really important, especially if you want to increase certain responses in the individual and the athlete. So they used to think that if you were lifting heavy and as long as you thought you were lifting it fast or your intent was to lift it fast, that was good enough, but it's not. You actually have to move things fast to be fast. It's like what my grandmother would say, right? If you're not moving things fast, maybe you're not going to get faster.
That's right.
What you can do is there's pneumatic machines called Kaiser. They give you a peak power number based on how fast you lift something. There's also a lot of velocity-based training devices like GymAware, push bands. These measure the velocity of how fast the bar moves or whatever implement you're using. And from there, because it's power is also calculated as force times velocity, you can figure out the power that you produce. So a real common strategy that I used is I find the weight. Well, you have 2 days, basically, a strength day and a power day. The strength day, you try and lift as heavy as possible within a certain. There's some stipulations on that or some criterion on that. But the power day, you try and be as most powerful as possible. So on the power day, you find the weight that gives you the peak power or the maximum amount of power, whether it's average power or peak power, and that depending on the exercise. Normally, your strength-based exercises like your squat, your deadlift, they'll be done with mean or average power. Your step up, mean or average power. And then your ballistic type exercises like your Olympic lifts or your jumps with barbells or weighted vests, whatever, they'll be done with peak power as a measuring unit. And then you find what load gives you the best power response, and that's your optimal power load. From there, you either stay at that load, or you can get a bit advanced. You can go, okay, I've got a real strong guy who's not that fast. I'm going to go 10% lighter than his peak power load or his optimal power load. So that way I'm making sure I'm working his speed. On the other hand, you've got a guy who's really fast but maybe not so strong. You go, okay, I'm going to go 10% heavier than his optimal power load, and that way I can get I can work as strength and power, or like the strength speed rather than speed strength, based on who you're dealing with and what that individual's strengths and weaknesses are.
So interesting, and so much. There's so much there that you can manipulate in terms of the variables to try and get the outcome. Obviously that you're after, and this in your worlds, you're working with the planet's best athletes in these very pure undertakings such as track and field, where it's just the body engaging with the equipment or the ground. So it's so interesting for the everyday athlete who might be a little bit thrown off centre there by the concept of mixing up their training. Say they're going to a gym and they're not rehabilitating. So we're not talking about rehabilitation. We're talking about performance optimization for whatever the pursuit. How important it is, do you think, that the recreational athlete does incorporate some of this, power training as well, varying the speed of their work?
So I'll just take a step back there. Even if you're in rehabilitation, power is super important because, for instance, and you're more expert on this than me, Brad, but there's things called limb symmetry index where you try and get 90% of the uninjured limb right. Well, if you do that just based on strength, but not taking into account watts when you're doing this, then you're leaving cards on the table in the return to play process with an athlete. So say, for instance, a person can lift the same amount of weight each leg, but one leg can do it a heck of a lot faster than the other leg, then that's still an issue before that person goes back to sport. So even if you're rehabilitating, no matter what, you always got to think of this power concept. And then for the average person, it's a tough one. As a rule of thumb, if you want to there's some common exercises you use. One is a jump squat. And basically the weight that you can jump around 20 centimeters with is your optimal power load. So you could look at things like that and go, okay, this is from other research, and it might not be specific just to you, but it's a good rule of thumb. But everything you want to be thinking of, if I want to be faster at something, even middle distance runners or marathoners, doesn't matter. You've got to do some speed work in the gym. It can't all be heavy lifting. Once you get to a certain amount of strength, any increases in that strength is probably not going to benefit you anything, or maybe not benefit you much. You might law of diminishing returns, you know what I mean? Once you get to a certain strength threshold, then you've got to start looking at, hey, what else can I be doing? Maybe I need to start moving things a whole heap faster rather than just concentrate on getting more kgs on the bar.
Yeah, and I mean, no one wants the law of diminishing returns, particularly when everyone's time pressed and, in the recreational space more so, that's for sure. And so previous strength and conditioning expert like yourself, Joseph, Richard Blagrove, who does a lot in the research space with endurance running, formerly, he espoused the advice around, hey, look, if you do nothing else in terms of manipulating your speed, think about going up quick, down slow. But you'd suggest taking that even a little bit further. And what does the jump squat look like? Like, would that be in a Smith rack, or is that in just with a free weight, dumbbells, barbells?
Yeah, can be. You basically just jump with a load. So it can be wearing a weight vest, holding onto 2 dumbbells, putting a barbell on your back. If you're an older athlete, maybe better to use a trap bar or hold on to dumbbells so there's no load on your back, you know what I mean? Or if you're a youth athlete, or if you're not experienced with squatting or anything like that, or if you're not very strong, look at doing things that aren't going to load the spine, or aren't going to compromise the spine, e.g. with landings and so on. So it's literally just a 2-legged jump up in the air. But there's many different variations you can use. And as an example with that tempo consideration, you can, if a person does want to play around with those speeds, e.g. down slow, up fast, you might start with a person going down in 4 to 6 seconds, up in 1. This will get some change in maybe preferable tendon stuff going on, all sorts of things. It will start building a bit of eccentric strength. Then you can start doing things where you go down as fast as possible, up as fast as possible, e.g. because you've got to get fast eccentrically as well as concentrically. So that's another consideration. You can do things like isometric pauses. You can where you just hold a weight for a certain amount of time. You can do things where you only lower the weight for a certain amount of time. You can use the same weight and use longer and longer lowers. Say you might start at 6 seconds, then go to 8 seconds, then go to 10 seconds with the same amount of weight. But those are all things, if people are interested in stuff like this, Alex Natera is a guy who's got a lot of good stuff on isometric specific to running, and this running stuff is regardless of whether you're a sprinter, marathon runner, middle distance, it's the same poses. You're a unilateral stance. There's almost complete hip extension, knee extension, isometric type movements for the knee, for the ankle, and for the hip. Another thing that people might want to be interested in is a thing called triphasic training, where a certain amount of time you prioritize the eccentric phase, the next amount of time you look at the isometric phase, and then the final time you're looking at the concentric phase, looking at making it as fast as possible. So these are all people that I've taken bits and pieces and added my flavour to, but they've been things that I've thought about along the process.
You're listening to Joseph Coyne, sports scientist and strength and conditioning coach on this Expert Edition. Support for today's show comes from the Gold Coast Marathon. Just like the Physical Performance Show, the Gold Coast Marathon encourages runners of all ages and abilities to push their boundaries and strive to complete a personal challenge. The Gold Coast Marathon is held annually on the first weekend in July and is a must-do event for any budding athlete, weekend warrior, or family looking for a challenge to complete together. Run for the good times at the Gold Coast Marathon. Visit goldcoastmarathon.com.au. I caught up recently with Gold Coast Marathon race director Cam Hart, and here's Cam sharing around the quality athletes internationally that the Gold Coast Marathon attracts in one of the most loved rivalries from recent times.
Recent highlights is, I guess, the rivalry that we've created against the crowd favourite. So Kenneth Mungara from Kenya, the running barber, 44 years of age, he's still winning the event, he's still performing at a very high level. But the competitiveness he has with I guess, global favourite and Boston Marathon winner Yuki Kawachi is awesome to see every year. Look, both have a wonderful respect for each other, but both very serious competitors, and what we have created each year, and that rivalry and camaraderie amongst two of the world's favourite athletes is something that the team of the Gold Coast Marathon are very proud of.
Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to complete their rehabilitation, get back to their physical best, and in doing so, cross the physio finish line. And in order to get there, we do not want to see you for a single session more than what you require or a single session less. We just want to ensure that you get back to your physical best. We start the journey with a 1-hour comprehensive initial appointment. To find out more about Pogo Physio's unique and award-winning services, including our fixed fee and very popular monthly wellness boosters, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back with this week's Expert Edition strength and conditioning coach, sports scientist Joseph Coyne. And what would you say, Joseph, are the top 3 mistakes that people make when they go about their strength and conditioning in general? It's a hard question. I know there's more than 3, but what are the top 3 things that fall out of you that you observe?
I'd probably say doing too much work in the gym. Or doing too much work that's not in your specific skill. So if you go and see a strength and conditioning coach, they're going to tell you, yeah, we'll make you stronger, that'll make you faster. We get more weight on your squat, we'll make you faster. You go and see a yogi, they'll say, hey, you get more flexible, we'll make you faster. You go and see a physio, hey, we'll get you more aligned or whatever, we'll make you faster. So it's making sure everything's always coming back to the skill that you're performing in. So I'd say people probably might prioritize the gym work too much. Like I know world champions that have terrible gym programs. Absolutely terrible, but the world champions, you know what I mean? They're gold medalists at the Olympics. You can, if you're good enough at your sport, your work outside that sport should be used to support the technical skill. So all your non-technical work, your strength conditioning, your rehabilitation, your flexibility, whatever, it's all got to be working around supporting the technical skill. And because I kind of sit in both camps as like a technical coach and a strength conditioning coach, it's been really interesting for me. But that's a big underlying belief for me. And so if a person's, like, for instance, if you're a runner and you're doing more than 2 strength sessions a week, I'd probably say it's too much. Even for a sprinter, 100-meter sprinter, where like that strength and power is probably more important than a long distance runner, unless it's right in the preseason or you're a professional where you get to sleep in the middle of the day and and you don't have to go and work a 9-to-5 job, more than 2 sessions is probably per week is probably too much for most people. And as you're getting closer and closer to competition, 1 session is per week, per 7 days, per 5 days, even per 10 days can be enough.
So that's mistake number 1, too much work in the gym and the need for everyone to bring it back to the skill that they're trying to execute. What would be the second one? Mistake. Second mistake recreational athletes make with their strength and conditioning.
Not addressing technical components of what they're doing. So a person that just goes out and runs Ks after Ks after Ks without addressing the technique of how they're running. And for instance, knowing what should be happening in the front side and backside mechanics when you're in any gait pattern, knowing how and where your foot should be striking underneath your body, knowing how much knee lift is desired relative to the speed you're running, all those type considerations. If you're not addressing those and if you're not working on those, like for instance, 100-meter sprinters will spend so many hours working on a block start. You know what I mean? They're the best in the world at it, but they will perfect this and try and perfect the skill over and over and over and over again. The technical component is massive to everything you do. And it doesn't appear that much because running is like a really natural thing for most people, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's such you break it down and it's a beautiful balanced dance. It really is. And
if you give me, like, say for instance, I do a bit of work with footballers and they come up and we'll do some sprint work and blah blah. Like, you can make people. I could spend 12 weeks in the gym with somebody doing certain things and whatnot. But you give me 15 minutes on a track with them and I'll make them faster than what I could in the 12 weeks, just through little technique changes, making sure the body angles are correct, making sure they have analogies around what I'm trying to get them to do so they can relate to what I'm asking them. All the technique is so important. Technique is so important.
And it makes me think in my professional work, Joseph, as a physiotherapist, how absurd it is for us to assess anything without actually seeing the individual complete that task. Okay, you're a runner, you've got something that's going on. Well, let's go have a look at how you're running. It's fascinating that the static measurements in a room have some relevance, but not at the cost of not looking at how they're actually executing the task. That's the second mistake. Third mistake people make with their strength and conditioning would be what? Recreational athletes.
Probably lack of flexibility. So I went through university in an era where the main paradigm was flexibility is not important. Stretching is a waste of time. You stretch before something, it'll make you worse. Your performance will go down. Well, thankfully that's been discredited by now. But flexibility definitely is paramount importance. Not just for maybe if you're really tight as a runner, middle distance, long distance, you don't actually have to be that flexible, like you don't get into too much knee, hip flexion, blah, blah, blah. But it's so important for longevity, for being supple. People want to be able to bend but not break is my idea on the thought. And if you're not addressing flexibility, then something eventually will happen. And there'll be things like your arthritic development, all types of things. You want to keep the joint space as healthy as possible through mobility, whatever. But that would be the second big thing, especially in Western cultures. So because I worked in China's the culture around flexibility. Like you go into a park on a Sunday and there's 80-year-olds doing splits on a park bench. You know what I mean? And it's crazy. But they have this cultural value of flexibility and mobility that we probably don't as a Western culture. And when I come back here, I see it all the time. Like in China, if you're an S&C coach or even a physio, you get somebody new come to see you probably got to spend unless maybe 1 in 5 might be able to do it immediately, but 4 out of 5 won't be able to squat properly. And you're going to have to teach them how to squat. It might take you 8 to 12 weeks. Who knows? Maybe longer, depending on how skilled you are. But then in China, you just show them what you want and they can all do it. So it's so simple. It's really easy. And part of that is that cultural value of flexibility, not being too hard in the joints and the lines through the body, being soft enough to fold, to bend, twist. Really important.
It's so interesting because from a physiotherapy perspective, I know papers that have shown that stretching, for example, as a injury minimization strategy hasn't correlated in some papers that the ones that I'm aware of with any reduction in injury risk, but strength training and resistance training has been shown to reduce injury occurrence and also lower risk. But then it's a different kettle of fish when it comes to performance. I mean, there's and the athletes that you're working with, they need to be highly elastic, but also super powerful, strong combination. So, yeah, it's a fascinating landscape. It really is, right?
100%. So always I have what my grandmother say filter going on in my head. And my grandmother would probably say stretching is probably important to reduce injury risk. So, you know what I mean? Like that's always, even with the stretching decreases performance and decreases power. And I was like, well, why do gymnasts spend so much time stretching before they do things? Like this would be a population that stretches the most out of anyone, but they can do like quadruple front flips running across a mat. That doesn't make sense to me. So all these things, even like the flexibility of tendons and how people with shorter tendons or might be more poppy and more economical and so on. You look at some extremely fast people. I'm thinking of Colin Jackson, for instance, who was the hurdler. This bloke could do the splits. He could put his ankle behind his ear in terms of how flexible he was. And so everybody's case by case, but on the whole, I would say there's some basic markers around flexibility. You should be able to put your palms flat on the floor, like in a standing pike. You should be able to kneel on your knees and go backwards and put your head on the floor, going backwards. And if you can't do those things, then, hey, maybe that's an issue. Maybe we need to look at it.
I was just picturing kneeling and putting your head back on the floor, and I think I can get there now. But initially I was thinking like a full back bridge, but no, I won't be getting that done. But you mean laying back just in a W sit with your head back on the floor?
Yeah, just like a kneel. So some people can't even kneel on the floor, right, with bottom to ankles, just with knee pain or whatever. But you should be able, first of all, you should be able to kneel on the floor. Then you should be able to lean all the way back and put your shoulders or the back of your head on the floor. So you're folded in two around your knees.
Would that be Joseph Coyne's physical challenge for the week?
Yeah, why not? And then palms flat to the floor in a standing pike.
All right, and from you, good sir, we'll require a video so we can have some frame of reference, right?
Sure.
Easy. You're listening to Joseph Coyne, strength and conditioning coach, sports scientist and PhD scholar, sharing around strength and conditioning for the athlete. If you missed last week's episode, it was a featured performer episode featuring record-setting professional skydiver Jules McConnell. Here's a little snippet of what you missed.
Yeah, I think losing close friends is a hard one, and someone who you've been training with for a long time and respect. He had an accident in 2015. It's definitely one of the lowest. I wasn't there, thank God.
To peruse the full archives of the show, jump over to your favourite podcast player and be it a featured performer, coach's corner, interest edition or expert edition, pick and choose the episodes that grab your attention and enjoy. For now, let's jump back with this week's expert edition featured guest, Joseph Coyne. Joseph, your work with hamstrings is some of my favourite videos that you put out on your Instagram gallery. There's just some fantastic stuff there that I've taken a lot from, just in terms of the different exercises and how you're approaching things. Once again, it's always individualised to the athlete's needs, individual's needs, but it's something that I've been really fascinated with in my work recently with runners is how important hamstrings are for reducing things like knee pain and the effect on the knees. And it kind of goes with it. It's commonsensical in many ways, but the force that they can generate at faster speeds, maybe up to 8 times body weight, multiples at peak force. What would be your advice to runners, say middle distance runners, marathon distance runners, in terms of their hamstrings? What's one or two things that you think that they definitely should be including somewhere in their S&C routines?
Sure. So the hamstrings. Couple of things, and my experience is sprint and jump. And if sprint and jumpers in elite track and field don't have a hamstring problem now, they're going to have one soon. So I got to deal with a lot of them. Things I'm a big fan of, like EMS, so electrical muscle stimulation for reducing tone in the hamstrings, and also giving it some type of contraction without any metabolic byproducts. Then also, if you're out there should be some eccentric component to your hamstring work. There also should be some rate coding or some fast component to your hamstring work. So, for instance, doing something like a 2-to-1 where you might come up on a Swiss ball with 2 legs, lift one leg up, and then come out with 1 leg on the way out, just so there's an overload to the eccentric part. Doing something like a Nordic where you're going down for 4 seconds, for 5. Once you can do that, go for 6 seconds. Once you can do that, go for 8 seconds. Or once you can do 4 seconds on the way down, hold a 10 kg plate and go down for 4 seconds. You know what I mean? So there's an eccentric component to it. Then there's got to be something fast going on with the hamstring. So because to prepare a muscle for a particular activity, there has to be similarities in the rate at which it performs contractions. So there's things like Swiss ball kicks, band kicks, flutters you call them, tantrums, lying on your back where you're going brrrr into the ground. All those things work really nicely.
Yeah, the tantrums are a good one. So the 3 elements, maybe some artificial, stimulation, EMS, for example. It's not a natural contraction of the muscle. Some eccentric component, which is lengthening and strengthening, and a fast component for the hamstrings. Joseph, that's terrific. If you could boil, I know we're coming to the end of our time and you're off for an airport trip, but if you could boil everything you've learnt in your career to date, in your work, to one piece of advice for listeners of this show who are out there trying to perform at their physical best across a range of endeavours, what would Joseph Coyne's one piece of advice be?
Always apply what would my grandmother say to almost any bit of advice you get. That stood me in good stead. My grandmother might have been really smart, I don't know. But like literally, so many things that I've come across of like, that kind of seems strange. Why is everybody going for that? And I did like a philosophy course in my first year at university called epistemology, and it kind of wrecked me for life because it's like, how do we know what we know? How do you know this is going to be here tomorrow? Like, it's like all about the science of like, how do you know this is actually true or not? And so I'm really pragmatic, but that grandmother filter for anything. If a person says, hey, if you can squat 2 times your body weight, you'll get faster. You're like, really? But my grandmother would say if I want to get faster, I should be running faster. Doesn't it make sense to me? So all this type of stuff is that would be my bit of advice. Long story cut short.
No, that's great. So question everything through the grandmother. What would my grandmother say filter? And, we've all got or had grandmothers, so I think we could all resonate with that.
Yeah. You want to lose weight? Hey, eat a bit less, maybe eat some vegetables, be healthier. Yeah, work out pretty good.
Yeah, it's. I say I'm smiling and laughing because I think of my work in physiotherapy, things that I've always had a gut like, no, that can't be. Surely that doesn't make sense. And it's funny. Often a decade later, the research then comes out to validate something that you've always just had a gut feel around. So,
100%.
So no, that's terrific. Joseph Coyne, you've got a lot that you're across and going on. Where can we follow your journey more? You've got your podcast. Put us in picture with where we can follow the journey.
Yeah, so that's actually the ASCA podcast, Australian Strength and Conditioning Association's podcast. Really good podcast. Anybody interested in strength and conditioning, there's guys from top footy teams on there, like All Black strength and conditioning coaches, Wallaby strength and conditioning coaches, rugby league guys, all the first grade guys are on there. AFL, Geelong Cats, all the support staff. Guys from the UK, guys from the US, experts in their field on there. So it's a really good podcast if people are interested about strength conditioning. It'd be good for any type of coach, sports coach, S&C coach, physios would love it. Even PE teachers would love it. So I interview people on that. I think it's pretty good, but I might be biased. In terms of myself, Instagram at Joseph Coyne, and then I'm on ResearchGate. I've done some research in surfing, and just now starting to get more and more research out for my PhD on subjective training load and its relationship to performance. And Twitter at Joseph Coyne as well. But Instagram and Twitter is at Joseph Coyne.
Fantastic. And we'll hook all that up in the show notes. Joseph Coyne, thank you for your time today.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed Joseph Coyne's sharings today. If you did, then please let Joseph know. You can find Joseph over on Instagram at Joseph Coyne, and do let Joseph know what it was that you took away, enjoyed, or throw any questions that you may have Joseph's way. You'll find me over on Instagram and Twitter at Brad_beer, and I too would love to know what it was that you enjoyed or learnt from today's expert edition. A massive thanks, as always, to the three very good folk who make the show possible: Daryl Misson, audio engineer; Susan Wilkin, all things show administration; and Matthew Olding, all things show graphic design. A big thanks to those leaving ratings and reviews over on iTunes. They are great feedback to receive, and they also have the added benefit of helping this show grow and reach more people who, just like yourself, are looking to pursue and perform at their own physical best. Massive thanks this week to Scott J. Douglas. Scott rated the show 5 stars and commented, "Have just started listening to the podcast and am loving it. I am in training for my 5th marathon, which will be the Gold Coast Marathon 2019. After crashing and burning last year at the 30k mark, I've been taking lots of notes from the guests on training, strengthening, and injury prevention. Hopefully the advice will get me to the finish line in better shape than last year. As a suggestion for a guest on the show, I'd love to hear from Balmain, New South Wales, and Australian Rugby League legend Wayne Pearce. He wasn't the most gifted player, but he worked very hard on what abilities he had and was a humble and fierce competitor." Scott, thank you for taking the time to leave that review and the support of the show, and also for your guest recommendation. We will note that one down and go to work. And certainly if you're listening in and you have a recommended guest, then please do let me know over on social media as previously shared, or feel free to email me direct, b.beer@pogophysio.com.au. Keep the podsies coming. They are always fun and fantastic. That's simply a screenshot of the episode that you're enjoying and tagging in the show on social media at Physical Performance Show. And it's great fun to see the episodes being enjoyed. Don't forget, if you want to ensure the show hits your earbuds each and every week as the episodes go live on a Thursday evening, be sure to hit subscribe from within your favourite podcast player. Now, coming up on the Physical Performance Show, boy oh boy, do we have some fantastic treats coming your way. We have an expert edition featuring Jared Powell on all things shoulder injuries, an interest edition with F1 racing physiotherapist to Huss Racing team driver Romain Grosjean, Kim Keetle. Some sports psychology. We'll be taking a deep dive as well into all things running bone stress injuries. But before then, next week, we are jumping over to a featured performer episode featuring one of running's truly great and enduring champions, Meb Klavetsky. Meb is the only runner in history, that's right, history, to have taken out a New York Marathon title, an Olympic marathon medal with a sterling silver in the 2004 Athens Olympic Marathon, and a Boston Marathon title in 2014, which I must add was won a few weeks shy of his 39th birthday in his PB time of 2:08:37. Meb recently released a book titled 26 Marathons, which captures Meb's journey across his remarkable running career. So next week, be sure to be tuning in to hear the highs, the lows, and the learnings from Meb Klavetsky. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.